Alrighty folks, just Benno again here guys. Still back on the track of our sustainable yield modelling. By now we should have looked at and constructed some spreadsheets relating to CPUE and maximum sustainable yield, or otherwise known as MSY. The next concept we're going to move on to is a concept that looks very similar to MSY, but it's known as... Oops, just give me a second, I've got to switch over to my pen. Maximum economic yield. Alright, so MSY was maximum sustainable yield. Maximum economic yield, as the name suggests, implies that we're going to be using an economic model or a monetary based system to try and get a result for our sustainable yield. Alright, so realistically what we look like is, if I draw a chart up on the board again, alright, we're going to look like very similar to what we had in the past. On our x-axis we're still going to have effort. Alright, and like I said last time, it was just a nominal figure: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, the reality is that could be, like I've said, the number of boats, the amount of net, the amount of hooks that we're allowed to use, the amount of time we're allowed to spend on the water, and every species or a lot of different fisheries will operate with different nominations of effort. Except up the side this time, or up on our y-axis, instead of using the volume or the weight that we had in the past, essentially what we become is a dollar value. Alright, so this might be in hundreds of thousands. I'm just going to put hundreds in here, and by the time we're up here, we're up to 1,000 or $1 million, for instance, just as an example. So the reality is still the same shape of curve, if I can get it right. Alright, so we call it a parabola or an upside down curve. Alright, it's not a straight line. What we need to do this time is plot the dollar value that's associated with it. So this way here, this is what we would call our catch, or our, whoops, it's just taken a little bit of time, or what we would call yield. Alright, we're going to convert that into a situation where it is going to represent the exact value, or very close to the value of the fishery, that the way that it's currently operating. And to do that we need to include the actual cost that it costs to fish within that fishery, and once again we would have to go off and find the dollar value for our price at market, and we will go through these steps just sort of trying to give you a bit of a background, the price of the fish, and the real costs, or as close as we can get to the costs that we know that it costs to fish within that fishery. So things that, you know, it might be insurance, the boat, the equipment that's on the boat to replace the boats, or the nets, the crew that are on there, the food to feed the crew, the fuel to go in the boat, so on and so forth. So the more effort we apply to the fishery, the greater the cost. So realistically we don't get this nice curve that we have coming through here with this one, right, which represents that we hit a peak at this peak here. Alright, and as we start to apply too much pressure above that peak, the cost drops away for us because we start catching less fish. Even though we're still putting more pressure on it, I'm going to draw a different coloured line through here just to help us out. Alright, what happens is the more pressure we put on our fishery, the more it costs us. Doesn't matter how much pressure we put on, that cost is still having to be spent to achieve that. So where this line intersects here, we're going to discuss in a minute. Alright, just to put us in perspective as to where we were with our MSY. Alright, our MSY, if we were to plot it out and drag across, it's going to be approximately around, in this situation, from our data set, if we had a data set behind this is just me schematically drawing it out with no prior knowledge. Alright, we would say that we'd be roughly around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or let's just say we'd be around about, just off the top of my head, around about 800 tonnes. right, or $800,000 in this situation, and we'd be around about what, let's just say 6.1 boats if we were using boats as our level of effort, which we're not in most situations. All right, so that would be our MSY. Right, now coming back to our MEY, or maximum economic yield. All right, we need to calculate out the point at which the fishery breaks even. All right, so it doesn't make any cash other than enough to pay for the fishery itself. So, and that's where this point is here. All right, so where our two lines intersect for the first time, we drop a green line down. Just doesn't have to be a green line for you guys, it can be any colour. And we draw another line across, and that becomes what we would deem ourselves as FBE. Alright, now FBE, the F part stands for the level of effort, and BE stands for the break-even point. Alright, so at this point, this FBE point, the fishery is still catching fish, it's still producing stuff for the consumers, you might say. You might even still be paying your boat off, you might be paying for your deckies and so on and so forth to be working in that industry, but it's making no money at all for the Commonwealth. So the state or the government isn't making any money out of it, or the country's not making any money out of it. So it's not a very viable point for the benefit for the entire country, let's just say that, or the state. So what we want to calculate is a situation where, I'm going to change colours again, I might go to orange. Alright, we want to calculate where the most efficient point, economically speaking, is relating to the FBE. Alright, and realistically, the quickest way to do it, or to think about it, is it's actually 50% of FBE. So we calculate out FBE and we just apply a 50% figure to it, and we find out on a chart, realistically, it's the point where this line here and the cost curve, the parabola one that we've spoken about in the past, alright, are roughly as far apart as possible. Alright, so the furthest distance apart from the cost curve and the revenue curve. So that's what this one here is. Sorry, this one's the revenue curve. Right, the one that's making us money in this situation. Alright, so if we drew a line down here, so I'd roughly say, just looking at it there, it's around about there somewhere. And we've got a formula that I will show you how to calculate this later on. We draw our line across, and that one becomes MEY. Alright. You can clearly see that if we were to run our fishery at MEY, alright, we're still coming damn close to, you know, we might say that that's 730, for instance. We're still coming really damn close to the amount of money that we were making at MSY. Right, but we're running it on one boat less, and we're also operating a lot more conservatively on our stock harvest estimates. Well, we might even say on our fishery mortality. So quite commonly, MEY is now considered as the primary place to be managing a fishery, because it has a lot more resilience built into it if a mistake may occur in, for instance, the way that data might have been collected, or the way it's interpreted, or hey, who knows what happens with you know, ocean acidification, global warming. It gives us a little bit more time to be able to adapt ourselves to what's occurring in the environment as well. So a lot consider it the nicest way, or the most the biggest priority, I guess, in terms of managing our fisheries against the triple bottom line. So effectively, it's still producing money, it's highly sustainable, and the social aspect of it still exists. So realistically, we've only, in this situation down here, we've only taken one boat from the fishery, and who knows, in there we might have an ITQ. So fisherman in boat 6 says, you can buy my quota, or whatever it might be, however it works, and he transfers his quota to the other guy, and if the other guy might be able to fish it more efficiently, who knows. Anyway, so what we're going to do now is to bring up the MSY data set that you should have saved from the last tutorial we did, and we will construct an MEY based on some nominal figures that have come out of the New Zealand orange roughy fishery again. So open it up, give yourself some time to maybe go back and review this one for a second. If you don't understand it, feel free to give me a call if any of this, or email if any of this doesn't make any sense. But really what we're aiming for here is to get this MEY sitting to the left hand side of MSY. If we don't have it to the left hand side of MSY, we're doing something wrong. Alright, but give me 2 seconds and I will open up the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that I saved from the last session. Alright, so I've found my sheet from last time round, and this is what I've said is the MSY data set. So we can see that we've calculated out our sustainable yield at 8,581 tonnes, and our level of effort was roughly 6,681 toes in this fishery over in New Zealand for the orange roughy. And if you want to, just pop over to the New Zealand fisheries website and see if you can find the information relating to the orange roughy, because it's actually quite a complex arrangement with the amount of zones that they have to fish. Anyway, so moving forward, in the past we've basically said, alright, if I need to use some data, I can just copy and paste it simply by saying, alright, scroll over it, left click and drag, right click to copy. Alright, and then we can create a new sheet and paste it if we want to. Normally I would say paste values, so we don't bring across any formulas or anything in the back end. But what I'm going to do this time is show you another sheet. I'm going to undo what I just did there and delete the sheet. Alright, I am going to show you how to just replicate the entire sheet, and then that way the formulas and everything come across if we need them. We can just move them out of the way if we need to, or if not, we may even be able to delete it. Reason in replicating something, if it's worked the first time, rather than copying and pasting and accidentally doing something in that process, this one's literally a one keystroke situation where we just click and drag. So no need to highlight anything up here anyway. Come down to your MSY sheet down the left hand corner here. We've got the CPUE button here. We've got the MSY tab next to it. All I want you to do is hold down the control key or command on a Mac, I think it is, and then left click on your mouse pad or your key, and you'll notice that this little sheet pops up with a plus in the middle of it, and then all I do is just drag it across to where I want it to go. Alright, it renames it to MSY2, but I'm going to go in and rename it. Just to right click on the tab, rename, and then just type in MEY. Alright, so I've just dragged it across without any copying and pasting. It's just replicated it. Now all I'm going to do is delete the information that I don't want. So I'm going to delete the chart because we don't want that chart. It's not letting me delete the chart. Oh, there we go. Alright, and I'm actually going to delete the MSY stuff down here as well because I don't need that. We've already calculated that. Alright, so we still need our A and B functions because that's the functions that we initially pulled off our CPUE right back here at the start, where B is the slope of the line, how much it falls away, or it might be increase. Very rarely is it an increase. And A is the number where our line, if we extend it out, crosses over the y-axis. So essentially that tells us where our most profitable point might be realistically. Gives us a bit of an understanding of where it might be anyway. So back in the little sketch that I drew up on the board a minute ago, I said that we want to include 2 more factors in this, and it's going to be the price of our fish that we sell at market on an average or a medium price. Who knows how they do it realistically. Alright, and the cost to fish in that fishery regarding the effort. So the price is a dollar value, and it's related to, we might just say sales. might be the easiest way of terming it, and the cost is related to your effort without confusing the effort over here in the left hand column. Right, so both of these are dollar values, so I'm just going to go through, left click and drag and set my little dollar sign up there, and then it doesn't matter what I put in there, it'll come up with a dollar value associated with it. Right, at the moment there's nothing in there because I haven't written a formula. Alright, now with this fishery, if I go back up here and I put in my cost, sorry, I'll put price first, and my costs. Alright, so always write it down somewhere so that we've got a reference to it. Couldn't really find too much information on this, but I'm just having a guess at what the price per kilo is going to be for these orange roughy, and the cost is per toe. Alright, so just so that we know what we're putting our dollars values against, we've got a bit of an estimate. Alright, so let's just pluck some figures out of thin air realistically. So we're looking at, let's just say $6.80. It doesn't sound like a lot, but by the time that gets to market it'll be 3 times that, 4 times that. But the cost for these guys to sell it at the boat, in terms of off the deck to a wholesaler or to a seafood person, fishmonger, whatever you want to call them, might be $6.80. Alright, now the effort cost for these guys, we might just plug in there at, let's just say $2,200 a tow for now. And obviously that includes, summarised into that is going to be all your insurances, all the diesel, all the food, all the maintenance, slip fees, deckhand fees, paying yourself a wage, paying whatever else is involved in it. They lump it up and put it into term it into the cost per effort or level of effort. Alright, so very simply we can come through and use a very simple formula where we would just go equals price has to do with the yield. So price goes with yield and cost goes with effort. So we would just go equals price, so we would put the equals in our target cell of E10 and then come up and just left click on our price and then multiply it with shift 8 by the cell reference D10. Alright, and now if I press enter, alright, I come up with a price of 0 or a dash because there is no price attached to a level of effort which produces no fish. So we're basically going 0. But I always start at 0 because it gives us a nice curve. Alright, now if I want to click and drag this down, we're going to have this situation where if I drag it down, it changes rapidly, looks wrong. Right, we've got all these values and things in here, and I described to you before, Control Z to get out of that. As I'm dragging down, it's logically taking the number that it started with, D5, and then multiplying it by D10 down here. Alright, so it's going to move that gap down the same way again, and then it's going to be multiplying D6 by D11, D7 by D12. Oh, when D7 multiplies by D12 we get a value error because there's no number in D7. So to fix that up, we put dollar signs in front of the value we want to fix, and in this case it's the price. So I put a dollar sign in there and a dollar sign in there. Oops. And now we can left click and drag, hover over that bottom right hand corner till the the cross changes from a big fat white one to a little skinny black one. And click and drag, and this time around these hash symbols that have come up are just because the number doesn't fit into the column. So I've just gone up here and resized it by hovering between the E and F and then double left click on your mouse button and it automatically resizes. Alright, now this is going to pose a problem for us later on where we've got a small value measured against a rather large value. So we've got to be conscious that where we've got this dollar per kilo situation and our tow is in a really high number for the amount of effort, we're going to end up with our numbers out of sync a little bit, I think is the easiest way to say it. So we might have to apply a conversion factor to bring our price up to tonnes. But I'll just see how we go first, and then we might go back and modify it. yeah, it's just really something to be aware of. Normally when we're speaking about price, we think about it in price per kilo because that's the way that markets sell it a lot of the time. But when we're fishing, we're selling big volumes of it, so this price might even be in price per tonne, in which case this would be just a factor of 1,000 higher, which would be $6,800. But I'll get to that if we need to. Alright, so over here, it's the same formula pretty much, except we're just going to apply the cost value attached to the effort. Alright, so it's equals in our target reference cell F10 equals the tow cost multiplied by the effort that's going into that fishing for that fishery, and then we put our dollar signs in between the D, before the D and after the D, to lock it away. Then we can click and fill down. Off we go. Alright, now I'll do this a bit slowly this time, see how our cross changes a couple of times. We want that double left and right pointed cross, and then just left double click and it resizes for us just so that we can see what our values are. Right, now you can see that if I was to try and compare these values together at the moment, I'm kind of hoping to illustrate the issue that we suffer when we plot the chart out, that this one here is like a major factor of 1,000 higher than this one here, so it makes it very hard to compare the two prices or the two dollar values. Alright, so what we're going to do now is to replicate almost what we did last time with our MSY chart. So we're going to go into insert, put a scatter chart in. I'll drag him out of the way so I can see what's going on. Alright, we're going to select data and we're going to add 2 entries this time, not 1. So remove your Y value. Alright, remember that your Y value is your effort. Alright, so we're going to put in the Y value down here. Alright, and then we're going to put in the, oops, daisies, sorry, I'm going the wrong way around there. That effort is the X value. Oh, now it's not letting me do it. So let's go back over here, the effort and cost. So effort goes with cost. Alright, and the series X value for that is your effort. Sorry, I got that back the wrong way. Effort's always on the X axis. Alright, so we can click OK. And then we're going to add another series and we're going to put in our Y value as our price. Okay, and it's got this little sketchy bit at the start here. And the X value for that is effort. No, it's not, sorry. Boo-booed that. Alright, I think we are jammed up here because this number is such a small number. This is our revenue curve. It should be that nice big arc that we were getting before when I drew it off on the board. I think we're getting that because this value up here is so far different to anything else in terms of the cost per tow. We really need to have these in, you know, the same level of monetary value, I guess. So if I just change this to 6,800, fingers crossed that when I press enter, it changes the chart. Alright, boom. Alright, it's probably still a little bit wonky looking, and that's just normally because of the way that we set up our chart at the start. Looks a bit better there now. Alright, what I'm going to do is to just neaten this up a little bit by removing the data points. So just click on the data points, right click, add a trend line, and this time we're going to put a polynomial through it again. That gives us a nice neat line. And I'll do the same thing with this one, and then I'll remove the data points, add a trend line. This one's a linear line, and I'm going to change the line color to a solid line, and I'm going to make it red. Alright, then I'm going to move the data points. think I just right click on there. Give me a second. I'm not going to worry about it too much. We can clean it up by not having those data points in there, which makes it look nice and neat. But I'm just being anal if I go into there, spend 10 minutes trying to figure out how to do that. So I'm just going to leave it how it is. Alright, so what we've got now is something that resembles the MSY, but it's got this cost curve running through it. So revenue curve, up and down, and the cost curve, straight line leading off to the edge. I'm just going to delete that box because there's not really any reference for us right now. It's only two lines on the chart. Alright, so this point over here is what we would deem FBE. Alright, and the simplest way for us to get a representation on that is to just insert a shape, come across to a line, put our cursor roughly over where it is for now, and just click shift, left mouse button, and it draws it in a straight line with the shift button anyway. Alright, so we draw it to there, and that shows us our level of effort where it is on the bottom axis, the x-axis. Roughly, I don't know, what's that, probably 11,900 toes for this situation. Do it again, we'll insert our line over here from this point. It's kind of important that we illustrate it because we're going to come up with the numbers in a minute with formulas, and they need to be in the same ballpark, otherwise it's a way of just double checking our numbers by drawing a line on the chart. It just seems like I'm getting the crayons out and scribbling all over everything, but in reality it's not. It's just giving us a representation of, alright, we should be roughly around about the $28 million mark by the time we come out at FBE. Alright, and half of that is going to be around about the $14 million mark. Does that make sense? So $28 million over here. Oh, sorry, and half of that won't be there. God, I'm an idiot. Should be up here somewhere, around about 14. It's at 11,000. So we should just say, let's just say 6,000 is roughly half. 6,000 toes. We should be up around, before we pay anything back in terms of our cost to access the fishery, we should be up around about $56 million mark for the entire fishery. So quick representation there. Put our line back in. Let's just say we're thinking about, I said about 11,900. So I'm just go a tad under 6,000. Draw a line up. Stop it where it hits the curve. Alright, put another one in from roughly where you think it is, across to the y-axis, holding down shift at the same time because it gives us that straight line. Alright, and that's our FMEY, or our MEY. At that point, our sustainable yield was roughly here somewhere. If we switch back to there. So a little bit, probably closer to 7,000. Alright, we're a little bit under 6,000. Alright, so from here, we've got this nice data set with, don't be worried about the hashes as I zoom out, they'll collapse and I can resize them to fit them in. Alright, just like I did before. I can do that with everything. Alright, now we want to come through and we want to put in a couple of things. We want to put in FBE. Alright. We want to put in FMEY. Alright, we'll just start with that for now. Alright, like I've said in the past, it's really, be really conscious or really diligent of, oh, whoopsie daisies. Oh. Sorry, of being able to write the formulas out so that we can, so particularly for me or particularly for somebody else who might be looking at where an error might have occurred, that you've actually used the right formula. Now this formula is, oh, actually don't put the equal sign in there, put a space or something at the start so that we can see what our formula should look like. Alright, and it's cost divided by price minus A divided by B. Alright, that's the actual formula that we're going to need to write into the next cell. Alright, and to get MEY, we already, or sorry, the level of effort, MEY or whatever it might be, we are 50% of that, and 50% as a decimal is 0.5. Alright, sorry, made a boo-boo again, need to put a space in there so it doesn't think it's a formula. 0.5 times by cost divided by price minus A divided by B. Alright, now we're going to have to put some formula brackets around this eventually, so I may as well do them now. Alright, so what we've done there is lump the cost divided by price together before the minus A is added to it, and then it's going to calculate the divided by B before it puts the multiplied by value in there. So it's going to do everything in these brackets, and then it's going to multiply the factor of 50% or 0.5 in a decimal. So up here we would need to do the same thing. So we need this to calculate cost divided by price first, and then minus A. Alright, and then divide it all by B. Alright, so we don't have to put another set of brackets in there now because there's no other numbers that happen after the minus B. So over here we're going to replicate that by putting the actual formula in. Alright, so equals to tell us that it's a formula. So two brackets, come up, find your cost. Alright, then divide it by the price, close a bracket. Then we're going to go up here, minus A, close the bracket, and then divide it by B. And then we press enter, and it's going to give us our formula at FBE at roughly 11,680 toes, which isn't too far off where we would thought it would have been. I think I might have said about 11,800, but I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty within the ballpark. Alright, now we don't really have to go back through and do this whole formula the way it has been. Realistically, all it is I can just take this 0.5 and multiply it by that factor there, because that cost divided by price is already done. So it's a shortcut to get that formula, but I just wanted to show you that that's what that formula actually is. Alright, so the shortcut to that formula is just equals 0.5 multiplied by the number that's already been done. Alright, and we sit at roughly 5,840 toes, which probably isn't too far off where I put the line down in the first place. We could probably shift it a tad. Somewhere there. And then pull this down a touch, just to make it look a bit better. Alright, so we've just calculated out FBE, so the formula where the fishery breaks even, and then we've taken 50% of that where the fishery is maximising its economic return while remaining sustainable. Alright, but from here we can use the values to give us a few more little bits of information which are really helpful. Whoops. Alright, so those two factors there are largely based on the amount of effort. What we want to do is come into here and go MEY. Sorry, hang on a second. I think I've boo-booed something. No, that's right. Right, let's just go MEY in here. We're going to put it in 3 times. But I'm going to give you 3 different ways that we're going to represent it. So we're going to have the revenue. Alright, so the total amount of money the fishery makes before any costs are applied to it. Then we're going to put the costs in there. And then we're going to have the profit, or what we call economic rent. So it's the amount of money that the fishery gives us after everything's been paid for. Alright, now revenue, what we're going to do is to take there is bigger formulas, but I'm going to show you the shortcut to do it. So that's our level of effort. Alright, that's to take MEY. So we're going to use that number, and we're going to apply the dollar value attached to taking that. So it's just equals this multiplied by, what are we doing? Revenue, sorry, by the price. Oops, screwed something up there. Equals that times that. Alright, so we've just taken the price, multiplied it by the Oh, hang on, Dick. No, screwed something up. Give me 2 seconds, I'll fix it. Getting ahead of myself. Sorry folks, it just appears that I've had a bit of a brain fart, and I've actually gone down the garden path, and that's one of the issues with taking shortcuts as you get into this situation of taking the easy way out. So I've just gone back off and had to quickly look at a reference book to find out what our revenue at MEY is going to be, and it's not what I initially started doing, where I just said, I was going to apply the price to take this price up here and then apply it to this number down here. And then I had a bit of a look at it for a second and went, well, I can't apply the price to the effort, right? Because the price is related to the volume or the yield that we're talking about. So I've just gone off and had a look at the formula, and the formula is written out like such. So it's A F MEY, so the A function multiplied by the level of effort at MEY, so this number here, plus, sorry, that's going to have a bracket around it there for a second, just so that we don't get confused. That's going to be A times FMEY, plus B times FMEY to the power of 2. Alright, and then multiplied by the price. Alright, so it's practically the same formula that we used right back for MSY, the calculation of the MSY to get the yield curve to come out back in the last session. Alright, so I'll make that a bit bigger again so that we can see what's going on. Alright, so over here it's going to equal, I need to open it with 2 brackets, A times FMEY, alright, close that bracket, plus open bracket, B times, where's our FMEY? I need a bracket around it there, to the power of 2, which is Shift 6 or Command 6 I think on a Mac keyboard, to the power of 2, close those brackets, put a third one around it so you can see that the 2 black brackets, one black bracket at the start, one black bracket at the end, means that the formula is fully closed, and then we're going to multiply that by the price back up the top. Alright, so the total value of our fishery, if we look at it at this point in time, which makes sense now, doesn't make sense the way it was before because the numbers didn't line up with the chart. We draw our line up to here. I'll just extend this out, I must have accidentally shifted the chart a touch. Alright, is roughly $57 million before we've applied any costs to the formulas at the moment. So to establish what the costs are worth, it's basically just the cost that we have per ton, per level of effort, so $2,200 per tow, multiplied by the effort at MEY. So if we just write it out, it's going to be cost multiplied by FMEY. Alright, so the level of effort used to take the MEY. So it equals, go up and find our cost here, multiply it out with the MEY cost just here, or the level of effort MEY, alright, which is going to cost us $12,848,000 for the entire fishery, based on that figure, to access the fishery and catch what they need to catch. Now the profit itself is going to be MEY, sorry I better go back in here, MEY minus the fishing costs. Alright, so it's practically this figure minus that figure, which is the easiest way to go. It's the easiest one of the whole lot, equals this minus this, press enter. Alright, so that there is our bottom line, I guess you would say, of $44,580,873 in complete profit for the fishery itself. So that money is after everything's paid for on the boats, and it's money that goes back into the GDP or whatever you might say for the state or for the country. So at this point our fishery is still making a lot of money, alright, but we're up here, we're running a little bit more sustainably, or not necessarily more sustainably, but we're running less of a risk in terms of if we make an error somewhere along the line. And it actually translates a lot better to being able to manage quotas, so we can put dollar values on what those quotas might be worth, so on and so forth, and then regulate it based on input controls, or combinations of input controls and output controls. Or we may just say, hey, set a quota system, set a whole bunch of codes of practice in place, so turtle exclusion devices, seal exclusion devices, maybe seasonal closures for areas to protect spawning stocks, who knows. But the reality becomes that in this situation here, we're running a lot less risky ship than we would be if we were running at MSY. Alright, so where to from here? Realistically, if we decide to run the fishery on an MEY or an MSY, doesn't really matter what we do, we would implement this chart as a visual representation into a policy or into a guidance note or a code of practice, depends on what we're looking at, as a visual representation to say, hey, this is where we're going to fish at, this is the limit as to where we are. So set the target reference point at, or in this situation it would be whatever effort, sorry, it's still the same. We would go back to MSY and we would set our target reference point at a little bit less than MSY, for instance, so 6,881. Over here we would basically say, well, what is it at 6,000? We might come into here and we would say, well, roughly we're looking at a quota of a little bit under, you know, let's just say 8,000 tonne. And then we would set that target reference point as 8,000 tonne, and then our limit reference point might be, you know, 50% of that, so 4,000 tonne, and then we would hopefully fluctuate between those two in order to pull up a situation where we know where we're fishing to our upper limit and we know where we're fishing to our lower limit. Hopefully we don't fish too much over our upper limit, our target reference point, and hopefully if we're not fishing above that point, we don't get the impact that, you know, in following years where we fish below our limit reference point. So from here, realistically, to continue on, you'll be assessed on some of this. I'll give you another chance to run through this as an example for yourselves on a different data set, and then from there we get you to do it again on another particular fishery that you choose. I think we've got prawns, we've got a western tuna and billfish fishery scenario, and we've got an eastern tuna and billfish fishing scenario. You might even have your own data set if you're working for a private business that's already got their own data running, and we could probably use that depending on how complete that data might be. Otherwise, realistically, this is going to be developed into a policy and a report. So we come up to writing a report. From the report, we look at how to, or the actual fishery we're talking about, so what are the impacting factors within that fishery that we need to consider. Is there codes of practice? Is there seasonal closures? What are the limits and the target reference points that they've set? Do yours match what they set? Who knows where we go to from there. From that report, we can then generate, it helps us to generate, I guess, the idea and the core of what goes into the policy, and the policy is your final assessment, essentially, for this project or for this set of units. So from here, don't get too flustered if this doesn't make sense. Please come to me with any issues if you've got them. Either email me or give me a call, or set a time to make some time for me to actually go through this over the internet with you. If there's a group of you that have issues with it, try and talk amongst yourselves through the discussion board, and if you all come to the agreement that you're all still lost, let me know and we'll set up a time to actually go through it as a group, because it's a lot more powerful to do it as a group, a lot more efficient from my perspective, and we'll step through the process again, maybe in 3 lots, maybe in a whole lot, depending on how fast we're moving, to try and get you guys to better understand the concept of it. So realistically, I don't really expect you right now to understand it 100%. It's a staged process that we're hoping to get you to be able to understand it, and then hopefully write a policy reflecting some of the information that we pull out of it. Alright, so for now, I'll let you guys go, and just make sure you save this data. I don't want you to dump it at all by any means. Just save it to somewhere on your computer in your file, because we may refer to it at a later date. Alright, ciao for now.